The other Eden, not the garden you learned about in Sunday school, not the green and gentle paradise of Genesis, but a radiant celestial Eden, older than time itself, where the morning stars once sang and the sons of God walked in glory. Before Adam's hands ever touched the soil, before the rivers of the terrestrial Eden flowed, there was a realm of perfect light, a garden of God, blazing with sapphire stones and living fire, the original paradise before Genesis. And in that holy place, a rebellion was born. Lucifer, the anointed cherub, rose with pride in his heart, and the harmony of heaven trembled. The watchers, those who stood nearest the throne, crossed forbidden boundaries, leaving their celestial Eden to touch the earth. That first Eden fell, its gates sealed, its glory hidden from mortal sight. But why has this story been buried beneath centuries of silence? Why do traces of this celestial Eden appear in Ezekiel, in the book of Enoch, in Jubilees, and even in the whispers of Revelation? Could the serpent in Adam's Eden have been an ancient resident, cast out from a paradise he once knew? Could the Garden of Genesis be only a shadow, an echo of a far greater Eden? In this journey, we will uncover the truth the enemy fears you will know. We will follow the trail from the mountain of God to the rivers of Eden, from the fall of the first cherub to the promise of the restored paradise where the tree of life stands again. By the time you finish, you will understand why Eden is not only your past, it is your destiny. You will see the garden not as a lost myth, but as a reserved inheritance, kept for those who overcome. And as you listen, I invite you to let these words draw you into that holy longing to feel the pull of your eternal home. If what you hear awakens something deep in your spirit, share your thoughts below, add your voice to this conversation, and let others find the way back to the original Eden. Like, subscribe, and join this journey, because the path back to paradise begins here, and every step matters. Life in the celestial Eden. Before the rivers of the terrestrial Eden ever touched the soil of a newborn earth, there was a place so radiant it seemed woven from God's own breath, a celestial Eden. Imagine walking in an atmosphere saturated with light that did not merely illuminate, but seemed to sing, a light that carried the fragrance of holiness and the warmth of the Creator's own presence. The mountain of God rose at its center, its slopes adorned with stones of fire and rivers clear as crystal flowing from the throne. This was not the fragile beauty of an earthly garden. It was a realm where glory itself was the air you breathed. Here the cherubim and seraphim moved like living flames, guardians of the holy presence. The watchers, clothed in garments of light, tended the mysteries of creation, learning from the voice of the Most High and echoing His will through the heavens. There was no sun, no moon, for the radiance of God was enough. This was the true original Eden, the garden of God, the paradise before Genesis, untouched by decay or shadow. Yet within its beauty lay the same sacred law that governs all creation, love expressed in obedience. And in that law was both safety and choice. The lesson is clear even now. No realm, no matter how perfect, is immune to the consequences of pride. If you have ever stood in a place so breathtaking it silenced you, know that it is but the faintest whisper of what Eden once was. Let the thought awaken a hunger for that higher country, and as you carry that longing, let us look deeper into how such a realm could fall. Lucifer's rebellion and the first fall among the anointed cherubim who walked on the stones of fire, one shone brighter than the rest. He was called the morning star, clothed in perfection, wisdom, and beauty beyond imagining. But beauty without humility can become a poison. Lucifer's heart swelled with a desire not to serve, but to ascend, to place his throne above the stars of God. This was not a rash impulse. It was a slow, deliberate cultivation of self-exaltation, the seed of rebellion watered by pride. The celestial Eden, meant to be a place of harmony, became the silent stage for the first betrayal. In this, the fall of angels was unlike the fall of man. There was no deceiver to tempt them, no serpent to whisper. The corruption was self-chosen. Isaiah's words still burn across the centuries. You said in your heart, I will ascend. And in that, I will, heaven itself was wounded. Lucifer's influence spread, drawing a third of the host to his cause, each angel trading eternal light for the fading fire of rebellion. Think of the cost. Light turned to darkness, song turned to silence, joy turned to judgment. And yet, this story is not only ancient history, it is a mirror. Pride still whispers the same lie to human hearts. You can be your own God. The warning is timeless. No throne we build for ourselves can stand before the throne of the Almighty. The fall of Lucifer was not just the loss of position, it was the loss of the very presence for which he was created. And so the gates of the celestial Eden closed, and the harmony that once filled the heavens gave way to the sound of war. That war would spill into creation itself, leading us into the contamination of the new world. The contamination of the new creation, when the dust of the earth was shaped into the first man and God breathed life into Adam, a new Eden was planted, not on the mountain of God, but in the east, in the fertile heart of a newborn earth. Yet even as this garden bloomed, shadows from the celestial rebellion crept toward its borders. The serpent did not arrive as a stranger. He was an exile returning to familiar ground. The watchers who had once served in the garden of God had crossed into the realm of men, teaching forbidden knowledge, arts of war, enchantments, and sciences never meant for human hands. Giants, the Nephilim, rose as the offspring of this unholy union, corrupting the order God had spoken into being. The earthly Eden, though pure in its planting, was born already into a cosmic war. This is the great tragedy. Adam was not merely a gardener, he was a guardian placed in a battlefield older than the soil beneath his feet. The contamination was not a sudden stain, but a slow invasion, spiritual decay seeping into the roots of creation. The flood in Noah's day was not only a judgment on human wickedness, it was an act of divine mercy to cleanse the earth from the corruption that began before man's first sin. In our world today, the same pattern repeats. What begins in beauty can be invaded by what is ancient and unrepentant. We are called, like Adam was, to guard the territory entrusted to us, our hearts, our homes, our callings, from influences that promise power but deliver destruction. And if Eden on earth could be surrounded by such conflict, how much more must we be vigilant, knowing that the battle for our souls began long before we were born. The story does not end here. It moves forward to why God, in his wisdom, chose to plant a new garden and place man within it, even after the first had fallen. Why God planted a new garden for man. When the celestial Eden was emptied, its gates sealed by the judgment of God, the heavens themselves seemed to grieve. Yet from that silence, a new act of creation began, not as a restoration of what was lost, but as a new chapter in the divine plan. The Lord, in his wisdom, did not repopulate the first paradise with new guardians. Instead, he stooped to the dust, shaped a being in his own image, and breathed into him the breath of life. Then he planted a garden, not on the mountain of God, but in the east, in the fertile soil of the earth, a terrestrial Eden. This was not simply a place of beauty, it was a sacred trust, a living covenant between Creator and creation. Adam was placed there not as a passive resident, but as a steward, a protector, a living answer to the rebellion that had once shattered the celestial realm. The lesson was clear. The mission of man was to succeed where others had failed, to keep the garden pure, to walk in fellowship with God. Yet woven into this calling was the risk of choice, the same holy risk that gave the angels the freedom to love or to rebel. This is why the Eden of Genesis was not a mere copy. It was a proving ground, a place to reveal the heart of man. And here lies the invitation for us today, to live as faithful stewards of the territory entrusted to us, whether that be a family, a calling, or a soul. Just as Adam's watch over Eden was an act of worship, so too our vigilance over what God has given us is an offering back to him. But as the story shows, even the most beautiful places can be breached, and the enemy often enters through the smallest gate. The serpent, an ancient resident. In the cool of the garden's morning, the serpent appeared, not with the clatter of intrusion, but with the quiet familiarity of one who knew the terrain. Genesis describes him as more cunning than any beast of the field, yet Revelation unmasks him as that ancient dragon, Satan himself. He was no accidental wanderer in the garden. He was a former resident of a greater Eden, now reduced to deception as his weapon. His presence in Adam's Eden was not a beginning, but a continuation of a war that started long before the dust of man was formed. The serpent's strategy was not brute force. It was infiltration. He planted seeds of doubt, bending truth until obedience seemed restrictive and rebellion looked like freedom. This tactic is as old as the first fall, and just as effective in our time, whispering that God is holding something back, that his boundaries are prisons rather than protections. The danger is subtle because deception often wears the voice of reason. In recognizing the serpent's ancient knowledge of paradise, we also recognize why temptation feels so tailored. It comes from an enemy who has walked the very places we long to enter. The lesson here is sobering. Vigilance is not paranoia. It is wisdom born of understanding the battlefield. Just as the serpent slipped into Eden before Adam and Eve fell, so too does the enemy look for moments of vulnerability in our own lives. Guard your heart with the same care that Adam was meant to guard the garden, for in doing so, you are keeping the path clear toward the true paradise. 3 stages of paradise in the Bible. The story of Eden is not a single garden lost in time. It is a trilogy of divine dwelling places, each revealing a layer of God's eternal purpose. The first was the celestial Eden, the mountain of God, where angels sang and glory filled every breath. This was the garden before Genesis, the original paradise before the first rebellion. The second was the terrestrial Eden planted in the east, entrusted to Adam as a sacred trust and a proving ground for humanity. And the third is the restored Eden promised in Revelation, a paradise renewed, where the tree of life grows again, where rivers of living water flow, and where God dwells with his redeemed forever. Each stage carries both a beauty and a lesson. The first teaches that even in perfection, love must be chosen. The second shows that stewardship is worship. The third reveals that redemption is not the recovery of what was, but the transformation into something incorruptible. These 3 Edens are not disconnected. They form the arc of the Bible's greatest story, from creation to restoration. And in this arc lies our hope, that the same God who walked with angels in the celestial Eden and with man in the terrestrial Eden will one day walk again with his children in the restored Eden, never to be parted. To see this clearly is to understand that paradise is not merely behind us, it is ahead, calling us forward. This vision should stir our hearts to faithfulness now, for every choice we make is a step either toward or away from that eternal garden. And so the story moves forward, from the memory of what was to the echoes of Eden that still resonate in every culture and every human heart. Echoes of Eden in human culture. Across every continent and through every age, whispers of a lost paradise drift like ancient incense through the corridors of human memory. From the lush gardens of Sumerian myth to the sacred groves of the Celts, from the Elysian fields of Greece to the Shambhala of the East, mankind has preserved a haunting echo of the first Eden. These are not mere coincidences, they are fractured reflections of a reality our souls were designed to remember. Even among indigenous peoples far removed from the scriptures, tales of a primeval garden abound, a place of peace, abundance, and unbroken fellowship with the divine, always lost through an act of disobedience or pride. This shared memory is the fingerprint of the Creator on the human heart, a reminder that we were made for communion, not exile. When we feel the ache of nostalgia for a home we have never seen, it is the Spirit's whisper pointing us back to the true original Eden, the paradise before Genesis. The lesson here is profound. The longing for Eden is not weakness, it is evidence of divine design. Every culture's myth is a compass needle trembling toward the same true north, God's dwelling with his creation. This is why the story must not be dismissed as ancient allegory. It is the living key to understanding why we yearn, why we wander, and why redemption matters. The restoration promise through Christ. From the first prophecy in Genesis 3:15 to the final vision of Revelation 22, the Bible threads a crimson cord of promise. God will restore what was lost. In Christ, the barrier between Creator and creation is torn like the temple veil, and the way back to the tree of life is reopened. When Jesus told the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise," he was not speaking of a myth, but of a living realm as real as the blood on his brow. This is the same tree of life promised in Revelation 2:7 to those who overcome, the same river of life flowing through the restored Eden. Christ is not merely the bridge between man and God, he is the door into the eternal paradise, the original Eden purified and made incorruptible. The most healing truth we can embrace is that our destiny is not to drift endlessly in spiritual longing, but to arrive, to enter, to dwell. The promise is deeply personal. He prepares a place not for a nameless crowd, but for you. And if we truly grasp this, it changes how we endure trials. Every act of faith, every surrender, every choice to resist the serpent's whisper becomes a step toward that promised garden. The final union of heaven and earth. John's vision in Revelation 21 is the crescendo of the Eden story, a new heaven and a new earth, the holy city descending like a bride adorned for her husband. Here is the final union, where the dwelling of God is with man, and the river of life flows clear as crystal from the throne. The restored Eden is not a return to fragility. It is a perfection that cannot be corrupted, a paradise without serpent, without sin, without the shadow of another fall. The imagery is not poetic wishfulness, it is the Spirit's preview of the kingdom prepared before the foundation of the world. The mountain of God and the terrestrial Eden are fused in this vision, heaven and earth no longer separate, but married in eternal harmony. This is the destiny that frames every page of Scripture, the reality for which creation groans. The lesson is this: our hope is not escape from the world, but the transformation of it. And in that hope lies the strength to live as citizens of a kingdom that is already breaking in. Lessons for today's believers. The Eden story is not a distant prelude, it is a living map for navigating the present. We live in a garden of testing, surrounded by the same ancient conflict that once shook the celestial Eden and shadowed the terrestrial one. Our calling is to guard what God has entrusted, our faith, our purity, our relationships, with the vigilance of Adam, but with the wisdom of those who know the serpent's history. The battle for our souls is fought in the quiet choices, in whether we entertain doubt or cling to truth, in whether we yield to pride or walk humbly with our God. The lesson of Eden is that beauty must be protected, and holiness must be chosen daily. Like the faithful angels who remained in the presence of God, we are invited to endure, to overcome, and to keep our eyes on the promise of the restored paradise. When we feel the pull of temptation or the weariness of exile, we remember the original Eden still exists, and its gates are open to those who wash their robes in the blood of the Lamb. This is not mere survival, it is the victory of returning home. And in that vision, we find the courage to take the next step forward toward the garden that awaits. The story of Eden is not just an ancient tale etched in the first chapters of the Bible. It is the pulse of your soul, the hidden map your heart has been carrying since before you could speak. From the celestial Eden before Genesis, blazing with sapphire light, and filled with the songs of angels, to the terrestrial Eden entrusted to Adam, to the promise of the restored Eden in Revelation. This has always been God's great design, to dwell with his creation in unbroken fellowship. Every joy you have ever tasted, every peace that stilled your spirit, every moment where time seemed to pause in beauty, these are fragments of Eden, echoes of the other paradise calling you home. And every grief, every longing, every tear is a reminder that we are not yet there, that the gates of the eternal garden still stand ahead of us. But those gates are not closed forever. In Christ, they are open to those who overcome, to those who keep the faith when the serpent whispers, to those who choose obedience when rebellion looks easier. Picture it now. The river of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God, the tree of life stretching its branches over every path, the air alive with glory, not just light but presence itself. Imagine walking in a world where there is no night, where every shadow has been chased away by the radiance of the Lamb. No serpent coils in the grass. No voice of accusation can be heard. Only the laughter of the redeemed, the voices of the faithful rising like a great chorus, and the gaze of God meeting yours without veil or distance. This is not wishful thinking. This is your inheritance if you endure. This is the other Eden, the original paradise restored, the place prepared before the foundation of the world. The tragedy of the celestial Eden's fall, the heartbreak of the terrestrial Eden's loss, all find their answer in this final garden. And as we journey through this life, through deserts of trial and valleys of shadow, the hope of that garden is what keeps us moving forward. When you resist temptation, you are guarding your place there. When you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you are walking its paths even now. When you lift your voice in prayer, you are breathing the air of that paradise before you ever set foot inside it. The battle for Eden is not fought in distant history. It is fought in the choices you make today. So I ask you, not to provoke empty debate, but to stir the deepest part of your spirit. What will you do with the knowledge that the original Eden still exists? That every act of faith brings you closer, and every compromise takes you further away? Will you live as if paradise were just a myth? Or will you walk as a citizen of a kingdom that is coming? The enemy would have you believe that Eden was lost forever, that the gates are closed, and the way is gone. But the blood of Christ has carved a path back through every wall, every sword, every curse. Your life, your story, your struggles, they all have meaning in light of that garden. This is why I share these truths with you, not to give you mere history, but to call you into your destiny. Because one day, all who belong to him will stand where angels once stood on the mountain of God, with the tree of life at the center and the river of life at their feet. And when that day comes, there will be no more need for longing, for the longing will be fulfilled. Until then, we walk together, keeping our eyes fixed on the promise, encouraging one another, guarding the garden of our hearts against the same serpent who once walked Eden's paths. If this vision has stirred something in you, if it has reminded you of the hope you carry, or given you light in a dark season, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's speak together of the paradise that awaits. Let's remind one another that we are not wandering without direction, we are going home. And if you have felt the weight of these words, lift your heart. If you believe that messages like this matter in a world desperate for truth and healing, I welcome you to support this journey in whatever way you feel led. If you feel this video has brought value to your soul or helped you find light in the middle of your shadows, I would be deeply grateful for a little energy from you to help me keep creating more. Every gesture, no matter how small, is precious beyond measure, because it fuels the work of sharing God's word and the hope of his kingdom with those who need it most. Like this message, If it has touched you, subscribe so you won't miss the next step of our journey. And let's keep walking toward the gates of the other Eden, together. One day we will stand there side by side, and I will see you in the light of His glory, and we will know that every step, every choice, every sacrifice was worth it. The path is narrow, but the destination is eternal. The other Eden awaits, and its gates are open for those who overcome. Keep your eyes on that promise. Walk in faith. The garden is ahead,